Hello, and welcome back to Comic Book Advocates on Geek Radio America. We're going to take a minute. We're going to talk about a crowdfunding campaign that's very near and dear to my heart. My name is Mr. Anderson, but in this case, I actually go under Bobby Gregory because this is something geared towards the whole family. And I try to keep, the more adult books or even teenager content under my name, Mr. Anderson. And for this, Bobby Gregory matters to me. And a lot of people might not know this, so I'm going to share a little bit about it. We're on Kickstarter right now, so we're going to dive into all the aspects of CatDad and Supermom. We're going to start way back in the beginning where an actual moment at a Comic-Con, and I happened to take the picture of the moment, but it just dawned on me. My son at the time was 2, turning 3, and I could see he was struggling. He was not on the progressive track, because when you have a kid, they kind of check out all the different things that are happening with them in regards to growing up, their size, the amount of words they use, their weight, and Jax was falling behind. I had been around children with autism in my life and had seen some factors that led me to believe that my son might be autistic. But in this moment, I saw him get lost in his imagination. I knew that there was going to be this ability to reach him and make him more aware of the world around him and kind of guide him out and let him really grow and show his personalities. I didn't see limitations, I saw possibilities. And at this point in his life, he would rip up any book that you handed him. It would be in pieces across the floor, and he wouldn't care. He would just rip it up, didn't care what it was. So I knew that he could identify with fictional worlds because I'd seen him at this Comic Con just playing with this little stormtrooper, and he was lost in the world and he was making grumbly sounds. And at this point, he wasn't really talking, but you could hear him trying to mimic some things. So I set off to make a book that would inspire him, and not just him, but other children. I had this grand idea. We were going to make a coloring book uh, where everyone that I knew who had kids was going to add something to it. We're all going to do it, and we are going to have a major Comic Con be behind it. And I actually had the major Comic Con interested in it. Things fell through. That happens in comics. It's common. There are so many projects that sounded great that just never get off the ground. That happened to be one of them. But as the beginning of the project, we did one issue that did get out, and during that, it was just going to be about my son Jax. And I'd always planned to go back and replay with a lot of the characters within that book, including some new ideas I had done. In this first book, I'd introduced the world of imagination within Jax's mind and dreams, where he could actually take something that he was pondering and really make it come to be. In that book, it was about what makes a superhero. And to Jax, it was his parents, and it was the selfless actions of parents that made him realize that his own parents were superheroes. As in a joke, I made myself CatDad because I actually am not a big cat fan. Hate is a strong word, but me and cats don't get along. It's my part wolf DNA that stops that from being a possibility. So to make it funny, I made myself a cat and thought there could be some humor moments in that. And Jax was a main character, and we had his mom being Supermom because all moms are super. Project falls apart. Raheel, who is the artist of CatDad and Supermom, comes up to me and he says he wants to work with me, and I'm excited because this guy is talented. I'm like, why would he want to work with me? You have that moment of like, this guy's above my league because he really does. I know you're on the radio, you can't see his art. If you could see it, you'd know what I meant. So I felt like Raheel was one of those artists that I worked with where I had to level up, and I brought Chuck with me because Chuck had worked on the original story, and we took the story of Jax. We updated it, we gave him new looks, and we made it what it could now be. And we improved on it a lot. We didn't retell the first story. We just continued from what was there and built on it that way. And we got a story that taught morals with farts. That's right. We had a main character, and ironically, the main character, Ella Fart, came from an actual live stream where I declared there's no such thing as writer's block, and people got upset. And then I said I could write anything. Imagine the ego of that guy. Oh, wait, it was me. I said that. And then they challenged me and they said, "Oh, yeah, you can write anything? Then why don't you write a story about an elephant?" And I was like, "Okay, done. I'll write a story about an elephant." And they're like, "Oh, yeah?" Another guy chimed in the chat and he said, "Then make one about a farting elephant." So the main villain, or the protagonist in our story, is Elefart, who literally uses her farts like a Green Lantern ring. And we put the book out. We got together. Chuck really helped the editing, and I really challenged myself during this experience because, again, this was about my son and his imagination. Remember when I told you that first book we made for him? The minute I gave it to him, he stopped ripping books up. He appreciated books from that moment on. The only time a book is falls apart in this house is either by an accident or it gets worn out. So that had done it. It had tapped into it. And Jax is a little older by the time we get to the first CatDad and Supermom. So I actually bring him over. And at this point, we know he's autistic. He's already in school for the autism. So he's already coming out of his shell. So I invite him into some of the planning of the book. And he gets to see the art as he comes out. He really gets to be behind the scenes and watching this. So the first book comes out. Amazing job done by Chuck. Amazing job done by Raheel. Of course, Chuck being the editor, Raheel was the artist, I was the writer, and Raheel actually introduced a character called the narrator just as a filler story that he wanted to add in, which is cool. So I have this first book. We put it out. People really like it. We actually had trouble crowdfunding it, believe it or not. And in 2020, we finally got it together and we found the niche. And we got it successfully funded on Kickstarter. And we released it. It was later picked up by Scout Comics and is now under Scoot. We get to issue number 2. And 2 is hard, especially when 1 was so well received and highly talked about. I mean, it won awards 2 years in a row, and it might even be up for an award this year. So there was a lot of pressure in writing the script. And the first time I had a lot of problems getting the right script because it's about my son. And sometimes you get in your own head about not being good enough. I give Chuck credit because when I said a reason it wasn't good enough, he encouraged me to try harder. And that's what I kept doing. And that's where we got the gold in CatDad and Supermom, and Elefart never forgets. So for the second book, I wanted to take an opportunity to continue the teaching of morals, but dive into something that mattered. And we're throwing out some ideas, and I said, you know what I'd like to explore when a kid meets a hero at a Comic-Con, and I want to see what happens and when they're not nice, because that happens a lot at Comic-Cons, and I've witnessed it. Luckily, me and Jax haven't experienced it firsthand, but I've heard the horror stories. So we kind of wrote about that, but I didn't want it to stop there. I wanted it to be also a teachable moment, because anyone can be a jerk, but I wanted to teach something else. I wanted to teach about what it takes to create a comic, because you hear the story of what I did to create this comic for my son. There's a lot of energy that creators put in to create these amazing stories for people. And I wanted to express that within the page. So we bring in the creator of Admiral Hero, the main protagonist in this story. And while we're talking about Admiral Hero, we get to meet the person who created the character. And she explains the journey and how that character came to be. It was a beautiful dance, I think, of meeting the world and explaining how characters come to be. That I wrote it in a way where I was very proud of myself. And it was one of those things that when my son grows up and he reads it to his kids, I want him to be proud that I was his dad and that I created these things for him. So that is the story in a nutshell of CatDad and Supermom, which you can find currently on Kickstarter with our second issue. And check this out. My actual partner in Continuum Comics, Mike Seeley, gave us a coloring book cover. That's right. The comic book will actually have a coloring book cover. If you help us make it come to life, you'll be able to color an actual comic book's cover. How cool is that? This is exclusively for the campaign. So you got to go to catdadandsupermom.com now to get your copy. Break out your crayons and join us as we teach morals with farts and show what it makes to be a hero. Yeah, and we kind of went full circle and sort of re-examined what it takes to be a hero in a different light. Because I think right now, especially, we all could use some heroes in our life. And remember, thank your parents for being your hero, because you know they are. That's it for now. We'll be back in a few. And now this.